everyone, welcome to the session again. So we are doing again a RC analysis video. So as you can see in your screen right in front of you, we are doing a CAT 2022 slot 3, passage 3, which is sociology and crime. This is again a very readable RC, although this was more of a condensed in nature. Don't worry, I will eliminate everything, every extra element in your screen. Before that, I would like to give you a disclaimer, and that disclaimer is that please use a mobile device like a laptop or a desktop that will enhance your viewing experience. Use 1.5x speed if necessary. Other than that, I think everything else is just fine. Now I will just turn down the webcam feed and everything else that is in the screen, and we will start with the analysis. This is there in the public domain. If you want, you can go back, and I would encourage you to look into the description, and maybe you can go to the Telegram community and all, so you can find that, the PDF rather. All right, let's start with this one. So what is it that we are looking at? So we are looking at sociologists working in the Chicago school tradition have focus. Please understand Chicago school tradition. This is some sort of a institute, I guess. And we are talking about sociologists have focused on how rapid or dramatic social changes causes increase in crime. So rapid and dramatic social changes causes what? It causes increase in crime. So this is the idea that we are looking at. Just as Durkheim, Marx, Stonis and other European sociologists thought that the rapid changes produced by industrialization, urbanization produced crime and disorder, so did the Chicago school theorists. Okay. The location of the University of Chicago provided an excellent opportunity for Park, Burgess and Mackenzie to study the social ecology of the city. Shaw and Mackay found that areas of the city that characterized high level of social disorganization had higher rates of crime and delinquency. Now, even if you do not know the meaning of the word delinquency, you can still move ahead. You don't really need to pay too much attention. So we'll go into the second para. Please understand, although this particular passage has only 4 paragraphs, this is fairly condensed. If you can just take a look at the second para itself, you'll realize that there are so many words that is making up the sentence. It's not very easy like a 10-word sentence, something of that sort, right? So we'll read the second para and try and understand the arguments. In the 20s and the 30s, Chicago, like many American cities, experienced considerable immigration, rapid population growth. Rapid population growth is a disorganizing influence, but growth results from in-migration of very different people is particularly disruptive. Please understand, what are we talking about? We are talking about rapid population growth, and that being a disorganizing influence. And we are also talking about in-migration. So we know immigration is something when people come from other countries. In-migration possibly is when the same country ka people are transferred to different areas. And we also know this is only because of the industrialization and urbanization that is happening. Chicago immigrants were both native-born whites and blacks. All right, so now we are talking about blacks from rural areas and small towns, and foreign immigrants. The heavy industries of Chicago, like Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, drew those seeking opportunities and new lives. Farmers and villagers from America's hinterland, like their European cousins of whom Durkheim wrote, moved in large numbers into cities. So these people were coming into heavy industry of cities like Chicago, Detroit, and they were coming here for maybe opportunities and new lives. Okay, so that is the argument, a simple argument, not too much too difficult to grasp. At the start of the 20th century, Americans were predominantly a rural population, but by the century's midpoint, most lived in urban areas. The social lives of these migrants, as well as those living in these cities, they moved to were disrupted by the differences between urban and rural life. So there is some sort of a disruption that happened because of the people that moved into the cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Pittsburgh. According to social disorganization theory, now please understand, you can call it SDT also if you want to, make a sort of shorthand. Social disorganization theory. Until the social ecology of the new place can adapt this rapid change is a criminogenic influence. Okay, so unless until these people are, they can relate to this thing, the change, there is a criminogenic or criminogenic influence. So there can be an influence of crime. There can possibly be people who can get affected by crimes due to the mismatch of this thing, the disorganization. Let's read ahead. But most of the rural migrants and even the foreign immigrants to the city looked like and eventually spoke the same language as the natives of the city into which they moved. Who are we talking about? We're talking about the rural migrants. We are not talking about the immigrants. And many of the foreign immigrants also. So some of the foreign immigrants, they looked like and eventually spoke the same language, and that's why these problems did not occur. These similarity allowed for rapid social integration for these migrants than was the case for African American and most foreign immigrants. So foreign immigrants were not able to, gel up with these people who were living in the, Chicago and all those areas for a very specific reason, because perhaps they were blacks. Okay, right now we are looking at a very, mota out of the blue. I'm making this hypothesis, but let's read ahead and try and understand. In the same decades, America experiences what has been called as the Great Migration. Okay, so this is going to be important. The massive movement of African American out of the rural South into the northern and some of the southern cities. The scale of this migration is one of the most dramatic in human history. These migrants, unlike their white counterparts, were not integrated into the cities they now called home. Okay, so they were not, so this is sort of a, you can say, racial this thing also happening, a segregation in which these people were not integrated into the cities. Which people? The blacks. In fact, most of the American cities at the end of the 20th century was characterized by high level of racial residential segregation. Do we understand this thing? Racial residential segregation? Yes. Failure to integrate these migrants coupled with other forces of social disorganization. Please understand, when we talk about other forces, we'll have to pay attention. The other forces of social disorganization are crowding, poverty, illness, and so on and so forth, caused crime rates to climb up in the cities. Interesting. Particularly in the segregated wards and the neighborhoods where the migrants were forced to live. So basically you can also say the black ghettos. So in the black ghettos, okay, again this is a very not a very good word to use, but then that's the meaning. The last para that should conclude the entire this thing. Foreign immigrants during this period did not look as dramatically different from the rest of the population as blacks did, but the migrants from Eastern and Southern Europe who came to American cities did not speak English and were frequently Catholic. So maybe you can say Eastern and Southern European. When they say Eastern and Southern European, maybe you can think of French or some of German people, something of that. So just to make an analogy in your mind. They were frequently Catholic, while the native born were mostly Protestant. So this is again a faction of the religion. The combination of rapid population growth with the diversity of those moving into the cities created what the Chicago school sociologists called the social disorganization. And this social disorganization is in a way or the other responsible for the atrocities, not exactly atrocity, but some of the crimes that was eventually improving or increasing in that areas. So I hope you have understood the 4 paras. There was not major arguments thrown in there. It was fairly readable. You could have read it really fast because there weren't any jargons also in this. Having said that, let's go to the questions and directly deal with the questions. Okay, so the first one says the fundamental conclusion by the author is that, let's read one by one and try and understand the options. But we know, one way or the other, what is the fundamental conclusion. The best circumstances for crime to flourish are when there are severe racial disparities. Please understand, although racial segregation as a word has been introduced or used in the passage, nowhere the passage is taking you to a circumstance wherein crime can flourish because of severe racial disparities. There is of course, the blacks did eventually, they did suffer a lot because of the segregation, the racial segregation, but that is not per se to say, is a best circumstance for crime to flourish. So that way this is eliminated. To prevent crime, it is important to maintain social order through maintaining social segregation. This is something which is exactly opposite to what has been given in the passage, goes out. According to European sociologist, are we talking about European sociologist or the sociologist of the Chicago school, the Chicago school sociologists? So this is again a very interesting one. So D has to be my answer. Let's read D any which ways. Rapid population growth and demographic diversity give rise to social disorganization that can feed the growth of crime. So this is the most appropriate option that you can find. So yeah, we actually arrived at the option, the correct answer, by elimination, right? Let's go to the next one. Hopefully this is yeah. The author notes that at the start of the 20th century, Americans were predominantly a rural population, but by the century's midpoint, most people lived in urban areas. Which of the following statements, if true, does not contradict the statement? I have always said that if true does not contradict. Please understand, this is a very interesting question type. If true does not contradict means, if true, this will strengthen. If true, should strengthen. That is the only meaning of does not contradicting, right? So let's read one by one and try and understand. Demographic transition in America in the 20th century is strongly marked by an out migration from rural areas. 20th century out migration from rural areas. Is that some sort of a out migration happening from the rural areas? So sort of, you can say. So I'll keep this one for the time being. A population census. Okay, also we have to understand that we're talking in context to this line only, that at the start of the 20th century, Americans were predominantly rural population. Yeah, that is given. But the midpoint basically showed that most lived in urban areas. This is because of the industry and better lives and all that thing, right? So the demographics. So I'll come back to option number A. Let's read option B. A population census conducted in 52 showed that most Americans lived in rural areas than in urban areas. Okay, so if in 52 they showed that most of the Americans lived in rural area, how is it that by the mid point of the century most people lived in urban areas? This is, nonsensical option, or false otherwise. Okay, so this does not strengthens. The estimation per capita income of America in the mid 20th century primarily required the data of rural. So first of all, the per capita income or anything of that sort is not given in the passage. So if this were true, would definitely not strengthen the argument of the statement. Economists have found that throughout the 20th century, the size of the labor force in America has always been largest in the rural areas. Okay, so this is a very interesting statement. Economists have found out. So if you feel a little bit nowhere again, economist never we have mentioned, so this also can get eliminated. So with that being said, I think A can be my answer. Demographic transition in America in the 20th century is strongly marked by an out migration from rural areas. Yeah, so that again, this is true and this does not contradict the statement, or this is, in other words, strengthening the passage or the statement that is given to us, right? All right, I'll come back to this question after some time, because I'm not very confident with these economists and stuff, because nowhere in the passage we have read about economists. Let's not digress. Let's just go into the passage now, rather than the next question. All right, which of the following is not a valid inference from the passage? Which of the following is not a valid inference from the passage? Let's read the options. The failure to integrate in-migrants along with social problems like poverty was a significant reason for the rise of crime in American cities. Are we talking about American cities? And the failure to integrate the in-migrants along with social problems like poverty and this. Which one of the following is not a valid inference? So please understand, 3 options will be true, 1 will be false. This is the answer. Please, have this sort of a reasoning in your mind. Otherwise, sometimes, your brain also stops functioning. So you might do these questions wrong. Okay. Just give me a second. Yeah. So I hope you understood the logic. Which one of the following is? So this one is true. So this goes out. We are supposed to find out the true statements and eliminate them. According to social disorganization theory, fast-paced social changes provide fertile ground for rapid growth in crime. This is also true, grows out. The differences between the urban and the rural lifestyle were crucial factor in the disruption experienced by migrants in the American cities. Yes, this is also true, but just for the sake of it, I'll read the last one. According to social disorganization theory, the social integration of African American migrants into Chicago was slower because they were less organized. Nothing to do with African Americans or blacks being less organized. So blacks, less organized is something which is false. So has to be my answer. This goes out. I hope you understood my, reasoning for this particular one. Let's go to the last question. Yeah. Which one of the following set of words, phrases, best encapsulates the issues discussed in the passage? First of all, read the first word and the last word. So Durkheim, Marx, Tony Shaw, definitely not. So easy question type, again an easy question type. Chicago School definitely is there. Chicago School is where we get introduction of these things. Native born white, European immigrants, and then we are talking about poverty. So we are not concluding this thing in poverty. So this also goes out. We are concluding it in some sort of a crime rate that gets increased. And we both, in the last two options, you can see crime and crime. So obviously the last word will not help you that much. The first word, however, rapid population growth and Chicago School, if you go back to the passage, you will realize that rapid population growth is not discussed in the first para. So this, set of words, chronologically, this is not very correct. So rapid population growth and then heavy industries and then segregation and then crime. So basically, Chicago School leads to social disorganization theory, which disorganization also leads you to migration, and migration is effectively what leads you to crime. So in a way, you can say the entire thing starts from Chicago School, and the theory presented by the sociologist, the social disorganization theory, the migration leads to segregation. It is not that heavy industry leads to segregation. So that way you can eliminate this also. C has to be my answer. So with that being said, I think you have understood how I have solved the passage. This is exactly how I would have solved it in an exam condition also. Obviously the time will not be 18 minutes. This will be somewhere around 10 minutes, 12 minutes, depending upon how many questions I'm attempting. So if I'm not attempting, suppose a question or 1 or 2 questions, I can easily save 3-4 minutes there. Okay, assuming that you solve the questions at a speed of somewhere around 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes per question, because anything less than that is nonsensical, stupid. Fine. So I have basically done all the passages. Just one passage is remaining, the Oriental, this thing. I will do a live class on it. I will solve that on the live class and upload the recorded session on YouTube and Facebook page. So follow us on Facebook page and everywhere. There's a link for you to support us. Consider it if you feel like supporting the channel. Thank you.